Good morning, or as we say in Texas, howdy. We are delighted to be here today. This is an exciting panel. Each of the companies represented today have very interesting and diverse experiences in the United States and their decision to come here and what they intend to do. So I want to briefly introduce each of our panelists and then invite them to talk a little bit about their decisions, their experiences, things that made it easier, things that made it more challenging, both in terms of decision to come to the United States as well as the geographic decisions that each made. And I think this is coincidental, but you'll see a certain Southern theme, I think, in much of what we talk about today. But first, let me introduce Mr. Jason Hoff. He is with Mercedes-Benz US International. He's the president and chief executive officer. There are many things one can say about his career, having been with Mercedes-Benz for many years, the vice president of logistics and others in the USA plants in Alabama, but also having served in the headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany. I think among the many attributes that one might say is since his ascension to the CEO of Mercedes-Benz US International, they have increased their production by 50%. And we're sure that's because he came to the United States as well. Secondly, Mr. Luigi Lazzareschi, who is with Sofidel, a company that has a major European presence, particularly Italian, and we'll tell you a little bit more about his company as well. Keeping with the Southern theme, Mr. Lazzareschi has an MBA from the University of South Carolina, so we're keeping that Southern theme intact today. Our final panelist is Mr. Timothy Madden. Mr. Madden is the Chief Operating Officer of Oxiteno, which is a chemical company from Brazil. He is a Michigan State graduate, but has also worked both in the U.S. and extensively overseas as well with a number of companies, including Novion, B.F. Goodrich, and Dow as well. And has become part of Oxiteno as they are planning an aggressive expansion in the United States and globally as well. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Hoff. We are delighted to have you here and look forward to hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Young. As mentioned, my name is Jason Hoff, and I'm the president and CEO of Mercedes-Benz US International, based out of Vance, Alabama, very near Tuscaloosa. Dr. Young and I have one thing in common. We're both big fans of SEC football. So really happy to be here. I want to thank the Department of Commerce for inviting Mercedes-Benz to join this event today and the next couple of days. We've been in the South now in our operations for over 20 years. Many of you might remember we kind of shook up the automotive world in 1993 when we announced not only were we going to build our first automotive plant outside of Germany in the United States, but we were going to build it in the Deep South in Alabama. We had some pretty modest plans back then, about a $300 million investment. We're going to hire a little over 1,000 people and have an annual capacity of somewhere around 65,000 cars. Fast forward 20 plus years, we've now invested over $6 billion into our operations in Alabama. We have an annual capacity of approximately 300,000 vehicles. We're the home of the SUVs, the large-size SUVs that you see on the road from Mercedes-Benz. So a GLE, a GLS, or GLE Coupe comes out of our plant. We also build C-classes since 2014. And clearly, it's been a success story. And if you heard the introduction, talking a little bit about, invest, grow, and succeed here in the U.S., that's clearly been the path that Mercedes has been on over the past 20 years. Why the Southeast and why the U.S.? First of all, Mercedes-Benz in the early 90s had made a strategic decision to expand the product portfolio, but also start to look at producing vehicles in markets closer to the markets that we sold those vehicles. As I mentioned, it was the first full-scale automotive plant for Mercedes-Benz outside of Germany. And we also knew that there was a growth in the SUV market coming. So those two things led to us coming to the U.S., and after an extensive site selection process, we decided to set roots in Alabama. Alabama was an interesting choice back in 1993, or really all the way up until we produced the first car in 1997. Alabama had built a total of 0 cars. We were the first automotive manufacturer to go to the South, that deep South in Alabama. Since then, it's been a transformation, and I was talking a little bit to Dr. Young about my experience over the past 20 to 25 years in Alabama and how much has changed down there. Just from the automotive sector side, we have 4 full-scale automotive OEMs just alone in Alabama. Toyota has an engine plant up in northern Alabama. The Hyundai has a plant in southern, just south of Montgomery, and Honda also has a facility east of Birmingham. So now Alabama produces about 1 million cars a year. Toyota Mazda just recently announced another plant that they're going to build in northern Alabama. And, Mercedes feels that hopefully we had a little bit to do with that growth that you see in the Southeast. And interestingly enough, they all are foreign automotive manufacturers. And the growth that you see in the automotive industry, especially from a manufacturing, job creation standpoint, are coming from the foreign OEMs, much more so than, let's say, the big 3 or the local OEMs. So Alabama itself, and you can say this for a lot of areas of the U.S., offered us really 3 things. First of all, a great flexible workforce. We were very impressed from our very first visits there about the willingness of people wanting to work. They wanted to be engaged. They're not there just for a job. They're really looking at it as a career. Of the approximately 1,000, 1,100 people that we had at the beginning, 600 to 700 of those team members still work in our operation. So we have a retention rate of people coming on 20 years of somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. Very flexible workforce. They will do anything. If we need to change schedules or if we need to move people, make changes, they're ready to do it. The second thing that the South, and especially Alabama, offered obviously was a great location. We had a location that logistically met our needs, had the right infrastructure in and around the facility, and wasn't so far away from some of the suppliers and other OEMs that had already started to migrate south at that time. And then last but not least, and I'll end my comments there, what I think has been really one of the biggest keys to our success is the partnership that we've had with the people and the local entities that run Alabama, whether it be state, city, county. They came out, they made a big commitment to us. We made a big commitment to them. And in the end, we've both held on to our commitments from the very beginning. And that speaks a lot for the state of Alabama, speaks a lot for, obviously, Mercedes-Benz, and has really been a key to our success. When we want to make a change or make an expansion, we have the right people to talk to. They're ready to come to the table and help support us, whether that be training or infrastructure developments or other things, and they're always willing to listen to suggestions and proposals from us. So, I'm excited to be here, looking forward to answering any questions and themes, and thank you, Dr. Young.
So thank you very much. Mr. Lazzareschi?
Yeah, morning. Thanks for inviting me here. Congratulations for my last name pronunciation, one of the best I've ever heard. Nobody of you, I believe, knows our company, Sofidel. Sofidel is not a luxurious hotel chain. It's not an Italian fashion company. We are producing toilet paper, unfortunately. But somebody has to produce that too. The company is originally, actually the headquarters is based in Italy, not far from Florence. Was born 52 years ago. Since then, the company has quite a strong growth. Today we are in 13 different countries in Europe, and since 2012 in US. Just to give you a few numbers, the company is employing 6,300 people, 1,200 are here in the States. We have a total turnover last year of $2.3 billion. So it's not a small, not a big company, but I mean, it's playing in those two continents. On our sector, we are the second largest producer in Europe, the sixth worldwide. Why we invest in the US? I mean, for sure, there was a need for growth. Having already quite an important position in Europe, I mean, it was impossible really to think about a large expansion over there. So looking around different possibilities, we have chosen US, I mean, for several reasons. Generic one, personal one, and also specific to this industry. Generic reasons, I mean, one is language. Even though my English is not really great, but I can assure you that there are more difficult languages worldwide than English. So for sure is an important factor. But also, I mean, a diversification strategy. We don't want to be only on one continent, Europe, but we want to be also, I mean, in another one. And also, we wanted to balance our currency exchange risk. We are buying most of the raw materials nominated in dollars, while at the moment we are selling in euros. I say at the moment because I don't know in the near future what is going to happen to the euro. So being here for sure is a way of balancing that risk. Business climate, for sure, the US and US states are in general quite friendly with business. But also legal certainty is a very important factor, and very good support from local bodies, especially in some of the US states, has been very important. There is also a personal reason that Mr. Young just mentioned before. I spent my best years here in the States. I was on my 20s because I got my master degree at the University of South Carolina. And being as a student, I always thought that I have to come back and give back what I learned and my experience. So I always thought that one day I should have come here and do something and contribute the way I could to the growth of this country. But then also there are specific reasons related to this industry. I mean, for sure, is the largest consumer country in terms of per capita usage. There is still quite a significant growth. But then also there are particular things. One is that there are not really very many players in this industry in US. So big supermarket chains, big retailers are looking for newcomers in order to have a higher competition than what there is now. There is also in US quite a strong growth of the private label business. Private label, I mean, product made under the name of a supermarket chain. I mean, Kroger with toilet paper with the brand Kroger and so on. That market is relatively small in US compared to Europe, but is growing very fast. So mainly we came here to US to have the opportunity to participate to this strong growth. And the last one is technology. European technology, in particular, the Italian technology in this sector is leader. I mean, more than 50% of the technology in the tissue paper business is coming from Italy, actually from a city that is in Italy that is called Lucca. So if we are adding all of these, we believe we have taken a right decision. Now, how did we arrive in US? We started with a medium-sized acquisition in 2012, and that was followed by another one. But then I started to come here, SelectUSA. I started to know that there are also better possibilities than acquisitions, and also is what we really prefer, to build greenfields operation. Some of you may ask why different sites across Europe, across US. But you have to know our product is very light in weight, very bulky. We need to be close to consumption areas. For that reason, at the moment we have a plant in Nevada, one in Oklahoma, one in Mississippi, one in Florida, one that is almost completed in Circleville, Ohio, and the sixth one is in Green Bay, Wisconsin. There has been quite a strong growth and quite a large investment, the one that we have made here in US. And I have to thank this event because I mean, this is my fourth year that I'm coming to this event. I found it very fruitful. In a few days, you're going to have, for those that are new, to meet many, many states, many potential future partners. Here, I mean, I have the possibility to meet with the Ohio people. With them, we have found a very good relationship, and we have developed that site not far from Columbus, Ohio. And recently, as probably some of you know, we have announced a new greenfield site in Oklahoma, a town that is called Inola, not far from Tulsa. But also, there are other people here, there are other industry. And just wanted to say that I found here my general contractor, the general contractor for the Ohio one and also for the Oklahoma one. So at the moment, very good experience, not really many things to say. Other probably one thing, or probably two. Gas. Gas is a key raw material in our industry. In the US, there's plenty of gas, but one thing that we have found that there is the pipeline system and the network still has to grow significantly. It's not very far to find a site with a gas pipeline close by, especially in some of the US states. The other thing that I have to say, even though in some area for sure it's easier to find skilled people, in some other areas not. The turnover in our case has been quite high, and especially it's quite high when the unemployment rate is very, very low. I have to say that while it may be very good to have a very low unemployment rate, is not all the time positive, not only because people are leaving the company because of a higher salary or because they have a discussion with their superiors. It's because there is a lack or a low interest for the people to learn, to be more competitive, because why should I care if I'm going to lose the job today when tomorrow morning I can find another one? So there is not really much competition among workers. In some areas where we have been, some people really, they don't care to improve themselves. Because as I was saying, it's very easy to find another job the following day. So sometimes a too low unemployment rate may not be positive. That's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Madden?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Young. I want to thank the SelectUSA committee for inviting Oxiteno here. We've had a relationship with the Department of Commerce, and we've even had meetings with Secretary Ross in our home country, which is Brazil. This is just an amazing forum, and I say that from experience. This is actually my 8th market startup in different parts of the world. I've done a startup in Belgium, one in Japan, one in China, in Malaysia, India, as well as Spain. And so this is, I'm actually from America, but this is my first major launch project in the States. I've started with Oxiteno about 2 years back as the Chief Operating Officer and responsible to organize the startup effort here in the US. You might not know Oxiteno. You may not even know our parent company. Our parent company is called Ultrapar. Ultrapar is in the top 5 largest companies in Brazil. It's also in the Fortune 500, global Fortune 500. So it's a rather large company in total. We have diverse operations in Brazil, but not so many operations overseas. It's a company of 16,000, or almost 17,000 employees. But out of those 17,000 employees, only 4% of them are outside of Brazil. So this move to the US for us was a very brave move. It's a big move for us, and one that is extremely exciting for us. Now, we didn't just start this journey today, obviously. We started this journey about 10 years back. We started out with a small trading company located in New Jersey, and then over time, we studied the market. 5 years back, we bought a large piece of land in Texas. It's located in Pasadena, Texas, which is right in a petrochemical complex in the Gulf. We chose it for the reason of being close to our raw materials. Also, with the enhanced oil recovery and also the fracking in the US, the ethylene prices are extremely low here. So it's very, very good competitiveness for us, and that factored into our decision. We also started simultaneously our pre-marketing for our plant, and then we started our economic analysis to see how feasible the plant would be in the US. And I'll talk a little bit more about that economic analysis later and the pre-marketing a little bit later. From there, then we started to look at technology. And I think you'll have noticed that there are a lot of options in the US from the standpoint of technology. We were looking for a development lab to help modify our products for the US market. What we ended up doing was searching different locations, and we ended up at the University of Southern Mississippi at an operation called the Accelerator, which allowed lab space for us. And we brought our equipment in. We ended up with 7 PhDs in place, and we've got a lot of developments out of that lab year to date. So that brings us up to the point of basically a launch of the project. The project itself is a very modern technology. It's the most state-of-the-art technology in the field of chemistry that we're involved in. It's 170 kilotons capacity, and that represents, for those who maybe not familiar with the chemical industry, that represents about 10% of the U.S. market for this particular chemistry, which is called non-ionic surfactants. So it's, as I said, a very big move on our part to come into the U.S. I'll give you some idea of some of the lessons learned that I would like to pass along, and some things you might want to think about. The first one you've heard a little bit earlier, which is about location. Again, that was important to us, raw material-wise, freight-wise, both from the port and the rail lines. So I think choosing the location is extremely important to the whole thing. I'll mention another factor that factors into this as well, which is the scale. What we found as we started to do our economic study in the U.S. was that the cost of labor, the cost of infrastructure, and the cost of regulation is very high in the US, and it's something that you definitely need to take into consideration in your economic models. And because of that, we decided on a large-scale plant. Reason being is that you need to spread those costs over the volume that you're producing. So scale is something definitely to take into consideration. Another big effort that we put on was a pre-marketing effort. In that effort, we moved a massive amount of material from our Brazilian plants and our Mexican plants into the US market. The reason we did this was for a few. One is to make sure that we had the production capacity utilized in our plant, certainly, but probably more importantly is to develop those relationships with the customers. I would say that the US customers are definitely difficult customers. This is a market where, where these customers are spoiled in a way with choices. They have a lot of good choices in the marketplace here. And so understanding well the customers is very, very important. Bringing a plant and not understanding the customers can be a very painful experience. And so we've used the last 3 years to build up the market and to build relationships. Customers in the US expect reliability. They don't have big supply chain storage inside of their plants, and so it's very important that you've worked out that supply chain and that you've proved your reliability before you start. The next thing that I'd like to say after that is the customization of the products and the development of the products, the continued development of the products is very important. I mentioned that we used the University of Southern Mississippi as our site for starting up our lab process, which was important because the products that we sell in Brazil, when we tried to sell those in the US, we found that there's some slight changes that need to be made. And that R&D facility with the US people inside the R&D facility was very essential to it. Even for advanced technology as well, it becomes important. And in this case, we were working with Texas A&M, Dr. Young's university, on some advanced technology in oil and gas. And so I think it's very important to think on the technology point of things. The last point that I would bring up is on people. I know Luigi mentioned that there is issues with labor and so forth, so it's something that you do need to pay attention to. But I'd also say there's a lot of very good people here in the US that you can bring together and form a team to develop the market and develop the business that you'll have here in the US. One of the points that I'd bring forward as well, though, is pay a lot of attention to connection of the US team together with your home market team. So that you can get the full strength of that. And you might think that that's an easy thing to do, but it's actually, it's not. It's something that takes some time, and it takes a lot of care of the leadership to make sure that there's a good communication between those, and you gain the full power of your company here in the US. So we're actually just days away from starting up our large plant. I'm very excited about it. Our company is very excited about it. Our customers are excited about it. And we're looking forward to the next step, building out the remainder of the capacity we have available with customers in the marketplace, and then continuing to build on the success here in the US. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our panelists. Very different kinds of experiences and different themes I'm hearing run through this. Certainly the issue of being closer to the consumers, the workforce, questions of transportation, of infrastructure, and so forth. Two things that I see particularly struck a bit as we talk about the South. One of the things that over the last 10 or 15 years that has been interesting to me is to see the rise in certain kind of support services. Certainly, we talk about workforce, and the rise of universities that's been an important variable in terms of their development. I mean, at Texas A&M right now, we have about 23,000 engineering students, of which probably about 20% end up going and working for companies who are foreign-based, and working here in the United States, but are foreign-based. But also the technology part of it that Mr. Madden, you mentioned in particular. We do about $1 billion worth extramural funded research on an annual basis, about 350 million of that is with corporations, in partnership with corporations. And so there's other kinds of infrastructure that you, having come to the U.S., has also enhanced opportunities and developments here in the U.S. with traditional American institutions as well, and I think that's been very interesting. But you all have a somewhat different nuance on it in terms of being, some are in mass consumer markets, two of you are in mass consumer markets, one in a somewhat more specialized market. Being close matters, having an American orientation to the product line seems to be important. But let me reverse this just a little bit and ask you, we have a lot of state officials here, a lot of federal officials here. You talked particularly about some of the challenges in the regulatory environment and that there's sometimes high costs of doing business in certain ways. Can you identify some of those things that would make it even, would facilitate even better in terms of state paying attention to particular business environment or the federal government paying attention to the business environment?
I think that one thing that we have seen is states, especially in the Southeast, are very focused on supporting training efforts. We've all talked about workforce in one form or another. The states have a lot of good programs. Alabama has, I think, one of the best programs of providing different training programs to get people ready for employment in, for example, the automotive industry or other industries. There are now programs that are also supported by the U.S. government related to workforce development. And one of the feedbacks, interestingly, I hear from, especially from suppliers, and the real ripple effect of an automotive OEM isn't so much the jobs that the OEM creates, it's actually the jobs that are created from all the supply base that comes around with it. We have about 3,700 team members right now. We have over 7,000 people that come on our site through our gates every day. And the multiplying factor of the suppliers is very big. So we're very focused on workforce development in our region for some of the same reasons that my colleagues on the stage have mentioned. But there is a lot of red tape still when it comes to getting funding and other things that is available and being provided by different departments, whether it be on a federal level or on a state level. And one of the things we've been working with is what do we need to do to reduce those? So back to your question, whatever we can do to try to reduce some of the paperwork and the other red tape that it goes through to be able to get the funding that's already been approved and available down into those companies is something that I think, I would obviously appeal for and something that we really need to be pushing.
I have to say, in terms of regulatory bodies, we are really being very, very impressed. As you may know, the paper industry has quite a strong environmental impact, or it might have a strong environmental impact because we are a heavy consumer of water, energy, gas. So we have to do with water consumption, clean water out, also burning gas. We have a quite high CO2 emissions. There are for sure differences from state to state, but we were really impressed by the short time period in which they gave us all permits. And when I say all, it's really all. In Italy, for example, I don't know, here it took 9 months to get the air permits. That is the most important one. In Italy, we will take years. And actually, probably nobody knows how many permits still we are missing in Italy because nobody really knows the whole legislation. So in that sense, really, we have been really very, very positively impressed.
Yeah, my comment on regulation is that, I'm a little more frustrated from that standpoint in that I think the regulations are really good. The air regulations in Texas are really good. I think they're important. The only issue I have is the speed that it takes, in my case, how long it's taken, because we're able to put in equipment, we're able to do our project faster than the approvals are able to come through. So sometimes the approvals actually hit the critical path of the project. So I think there still can be a lot done to speed the process along of these approvals. But as far as the regulations themselves go, I think they're excellent regulations. One thing that I didn't mention that was brought up in Secretary Ross's initial statement was about the Tax Reform Act. We did a relook at our financials, our NPV of our project, which we started 3 or 4 years ago, and then we're looking at that today. There's a significant jump in the NPV due to the fact of this tax legislation. So that is definitely something that will help from the standpoint of your return on investment. So I think there's a good thing there, but also a thing that still needs some work, in my opinion, which is on the speed of getting the regulatory things approved.
So I've mentioned a few themes that seem to me common and some that seem different between and among your 3 companies, and I'm really delighted that we have 3 very different perspectives on investment and structure. In terms of, Mr. Ben, you mentioned in particular relationship between the U.S. operations and your foreign operations, and all of you will have that in a fairly intense way, given your presence in your home country being so pronounced. How do you deal with that? How do you ensure that there is a more seamless company as opposed to 2 quite separate companies, number one? And number 2, we talked a lot about siting here being closer to consumers. To what degree do you export from the U.S. and how does that figure into your calculations in terms of what you build here and how you site?
Well, to your first question, we have standard operations throughout the world now. Our operations group is, in the automotive industry especially, is very big on making sure we have a standard production system that you can easily see in each of our operations. So that's actually one of the easier things, I would say, for us to deal with. There is obviously the time lags and other things that go along with being, let's say, a company over here and their parent company being over in Stuttgart, Germany, 6-hour time difference, East Coast, 7 hours for us on Central Time. But, the key thing is communication. In today's day and age, it's a heck of a lot easier than it was 20 years ago. Cell phones and things make communicating via video conference tremendously more successful and easier to deal with the differences, whether it be time and distance. Being we are a very global company. Our operations here does export 2/3 of our SUVs overseas. That was part of our business model from the very beginning. We said we want to locate our SUV production here in the U.S. because it is one of the biggest markets for SUVs, but we are going to build a car for the world. And so we ship our car to basically almost every country in the world. It does add a tremendous amount of complexity to our operations, but it also provides a lot of opportunities for us. Automotive markets react differently at different times to different things. And so it certainly helps us from being able to balance things out. Clearly, whatever the U.S. government can do and others, to try to promote and keep a fair, an open trade with some minimal barriers are things that are going to support, our business model here and really our business model at other operations.
I have to say, being your mother company German, for sure is much easier to have a standardized and everything under procedure than an Italian company. With the good and the bad things of it. Let's say that, distances is a complication in having a standardized company. Each company has its own DNA, and it's not that you can pass that DNA just with a procedure, but also with the way of a company is doing things. And at least on our company, mainly is to learn let's say, on the job, learning by seeing, and how we have done that, for sure there are several expatriates from Europe that they have moved to the US. Mainly, the task force is on the newest plant that we are developing. I mean, as soon as that plan we believe is quite well, let's say, organized, then we move these people to another site, or eventually they come back to Europe. We have found quite a strong ground because people, they react. I mean, here in US people, they are reacting quite well, and we are integrating much faster than in several European countries. I don't mention which one. Yes, but the integration is going fast, yes, and people, they like to be part of a big group or a big corporation, and having the possibility to have these different experiences also in other states, in other continents.
Yeah, for us, it's a new thing, moving outside of Brazil. So it is a challenge for us. What we've done is we've set up P&L regions, and USA is one of the regions. It has a P&L. Previously, it was all functional, so functional back to Brazil. Everything went back that way. It is a project inside of our company to try to work through this. I think if you look at the way people are today, a lot of times I think people tend to be sort of tribal. Are we the Brazilian guys or are we the U.S. guys? And that can be very disruptive to trying to make a global organization work. I think it's important that for people to understand that one day they'll be on the U.S. team, the next day they'll be on the global procurement team, the next day they'll be on the global manufacturing team. They have to have a lot of flexibility, and that's hard for, I think, sometimes for people to catch. And so we have a major program in our company to work on that. The second question on imports or exports, I should say, is an interesting one. We haven't really addressed the export in our design. What we did do, though, was if you think of these shared economy today and how people work together with assets and so forth, we've reserved about 20% of our capacity for co-production. And we've signed deals with some of the producers in the U.S. who needed to expand to utilize part of our capacity as well. So I think there's other options to export. There's a lot of things that can be done even inside the U.S. And although, as I mentioned, the ethane, which is a key feedstock for us, is the cheapest in the U.S. And so I would imagine that we will get to more export in the future.
Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes and 19 seconds left. In that 2 minutes and 19 seconds, is there anything advantageous, disadvantageous, or is it neutral, being in the U.S. and able to participate in the U.S. capital markets financially? Does that help, or is that just largely a non-issue?
It's certainly not. There's not a hindrance, whether there's an advantage or not. We're a global company. We have capital. Access to the capital markets in most of the major economies of the world. And of course, a lot of the capital that we do get will come out of those areas where we do business. So, definitely no problems for us, but also being a global company with, such large operations in different areas, there's a lot of availability out there.
In our case, our company is not known in U.S. The capital needed is quite significant, so all the capital is coming from Europe.
Yeah, for us, it's a combination, and we definitely take advantage of the lower interest rates here in the U.S. For one thing, the other is the private equity markets in the U.S. are significant, so there's a lot of possibilities there, both from the standpoint of acquisition and even a lot of approaches with regards to working together. So I think that there is a lot of potential here from the standpoint of availability of capital.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I think this has been tremendously illuminating, very different perspectives. On the one hand, on the other hand, we do see those common themes coming through that are important. This has been very helpful. We appreciate your candor. We appreciate your participation today. Please join me in thanking our panel today for this great.